Hey, dropout. It's my birthday bash today, you know. Unlike you, I finished college, man. A dropout like you could never land a position to be celebrated like this, huh? Laughing nastily, the manager was grinning at me. What awaited me upon my return to headquarters after 10 years was the manager's severe harassment. Despite 10 years passing, this guy hasn't changed a bit. I was about to stand up, clenching my fist, when the sound of heels clacking across the floor heralded the arrival of a beautiful colleague. "Mr. Manager, are you unaware of his real identity?" she questioned with a proud smile on her beautiful face. And so began my great turnaround over the past 10 years. It had indeed been 10 years since I had returned to the headquarters. The exterior of the headquarters has not changed. The layout of the rooms, the doors that make a squeaking sound when moved, the desks and chairs, the decorative plants, and the large windows designed to let in light. Each one of them brings a sense of nostalgia. The composition of the employees had naturally changed. My peers had long been promoted and were working in other departments. In the sales department's second division where I was transferred, there were many young employees who had joined in recent years. When I introduced myself and said I'd be working in sales from today, everyone welcomed me with a smile and applause. However, it's true that there were familiar faces. "You really managed to come back, despite a dropout." A woman approached, her heels clicking slowly. Her beauty was so striking, it seemed as if the phrase "bright eyes and white teeth" was coined just for her. As our eyes met, she looked down at me with a smirk that seemed almost like a sneer. "Long time no see, John. Remember me?" "Of course I do, Linda. Could you use formal language with me? I'm a section chief now." "Oops, I'm sorry, ma'am." As I corrected myself, Linda exaggerated a sigh. "This is exactly why high school dropouts are a problem, right, everyone?" Linda curled her lips up and scanned the entire office. The employees, seemingly baffled by the word dropout, avoided making eye contact with Linda and me. "You're right, Linda." Looking towards the source of the voice, there was the manager, grinning from ear to ear. His unnecessarily loud voice and that smirking face felt nostalgic after not seeing them for 10 years. "Manager, thank you for your hard work." With a tone completely different from the one directed at me earlier, Linda cozied up to the manager. The manager, approached by a beauty like Linda, visibly softened his gaze. "Oh, that's right, John. You joined the company before Linda, didn't you? Weren't you her mentor at one point?" "Just as you said, manager." Linda turned a flattering smile towards the manager. Thanks to that, the manager seemed even more pleased with himself. "How does it feel, John, to be overtaken by an employee who joined later, and a woman you mentored, at that?" "Well, it's understandable since you're a dropout." Saying so, the manager gave me a hearty slap on the back. I stumbled slightly, and Linda's cold gaze pierced through me. The difference in intelligence between someone like me and Linda, who graduated from college, and you, who couldn't even get into high school, is just too vast. Please, don't get your hopes up thinking you can land a position like ours just because you've made it back to headquarters, okay? The manager made a face full of pity and exaggeratedly shrugged his shoulders. Then, he looked around the room and, seeing the employees who had been watching our exchange with bated breath, ordered them to get back to work. The employees scattered back to their seats like spiders. When I looked at Linda, she had already returned to her desk and started working. Her profile was as dignified as ever. After a soft sigh, I headed to my assigned seat. A month had passed since I returned to headquarters. As I sat on the break room sofa, drinking coffee and wondering if my work intuition was finally coming back, Rachel walked in. Rachel, who works in the same division, has been friendly and talked to me even after Linda's dropout remark. She's a different type of beauty than Linda, more on the cute side. Upon spotting me, Rachel hurried over with a friendly smile. "Congrats on topping the sales chart, Sir John." Her sudden compliment had me tilting my head in confusion. Rachel did the same. "What are you talking about? Sir, haven't you seen it? On the 5th of every month, the sales department announces the overall performance." Now that you mentioned it, I remembered. Even 10 years ago, the performance was posted on the 5th of every month. Some things never change. How nostalgic. Even though you just transferred and shouldn't have any clients yet, you topped the sales chart in just 1 month. And not just within Division 2, but in the entire sales department. I've been thinking this whole month, sir. You're really good at your job. Rachel was as delighted as if it were her own achievement. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. I couldn't help but think she was cute. Being genuinely happy for others must be why she's suited for sales. Thank you. But honestly, I'm still not quite back in my groove yet. What? You're not at your best and still did this? That's scary. Rachel covered her mouth with her hand, making a shocked expression before giggling. I found myself laughing along. Rachel usually looks people straight in the eye when she talks, but this time was different. She was staring intently at her coffee. After a moment, she looked up at me with a determined expression. I know it's presumptuous of me to ask, but could you teach me some of your sales techniques? Seeing Rachel's apologetic face, my eyes widened in surprise. I'd always be willing to teach you. That is, if you're okay with learning from me. I want to learn from you, sir. Rachel looked up at me with flushed cheeks and pleading eyes. I'm just a community college grad, and the manager belittles me for it. If I ever do well in sales, he says things like, "Don't get too proud for a community college grad," or "A community college grad should only be capable of menial tasks," and then I get tasked with organizing files unrelated to my job. Because of that, the people who brown-nose the department head and the manager treat me like I'm just good for errands. But you, sir, you've been kind to me, and that means a lot to me. Rachel smiled warmly. My heart skipped a beat at her smile, but I quickly calmed myself down. From a high school dropout's perspective, a community college grad is definitely elite. Really? Oh, but let's not talk about education between us anymore, sir. I respect you because you are you, not because of your education. I nodded without hesitation. I'd rather not talk about education if I can help it. After finishing our coffee and on our way back to the office, Rachel started, "By the way, I heard there was this really good salesperson in a subsidiary. That was you, wasn't it?" Hesitating whether to nod or not, Rachel took my silence for confirmation and grinned, saying, "I knew it." I felt embarrassed and involuntarily looked away. A few days later, while I was glued to the computer compiling materials for sales, Lind extended her palm towards me with a somewhat displeased expression. Not understanding her intention, I inadvertently compared her well-maintained beautiful hand to her slightly annoyed face. Then, Linda frowned as if she couldn't believe my ignorance. "Haven't you read the company email? We're having the manager's birthday party this weekend. It was announced last week. The deadline for the party fee is today, and attendance is mandatory for you, even as a high school dropout." Speaking indifferently, Lind extended her palm towards me to collect a contribution fee. In a rush, I pulled out a bill from my wallet and placed it in her hand. Linda snorted and turned on her heel to leave. "Are you okay?" Rachel appeared suddenly. With a genuinely concerned look on her face, I assured her I was fine. Linda is beautiful, but, well, because she's beautiful, she's scary. Plus, she's always sucking up to the manager. Rachel made a face. "Speaking of which, they're really doing the manager's birthday party, huh? It's an annual event. Mandatory attendance for everyone, and it's pay to participate." "Huh?" I voiced my interest despite Rachel shrugging it off. When I was still at headquarters, such events were unheard of. Well, the manager back then was a completely different person, and the current manager was just a section chief at that time. I don't really want to go, but who knows what would happen if I don't. The manager is famous for demoting people he doesn't like on a whim. Sounds about right. I nodded exaggeratedly. "Oh, but you'll be there this year, right, sir? If you're going, it might actually be fun. Let's chat a lot. We're always chatting, aren't we?" As I said that, Rachel puffed her cheeks. Watching her, I couldn't help but smile, and then Rachel leaned in to whisper in my ear. "There are things you can only talk about over drinks, right?" Rachel's breath against my ear made my heart race naturally. I mean, John, Rachel, do you have time to chat?" Linda's cold reprimand and gaze flew our way. Rachel hurried back to her seat. On the day of the manager's birthday party, the birthday party was held in a private room of the sales department's favorite barbecue restaurant. The table was crowded with short ribs, skirt steak, sirloin, tongue, offal, and vegetables like cabbage and onions. Rachel and I sat at the far end of the table. trying to keep our distance from the manager. But the manager directed me to a seat diagonally opposite him, saying, "John, you sit here." Reluctantly, I took the seat I was directed to. Rachel tried to sit next to me but was sent back by the manager saying, "Community college grads sit at the end." Once everyone's first round of drinks arrived, a toast was proposed. I clinked glasses with the people nearby, even offering my glass to the manager, who ignored me. Sales performance, that was just a fluke, right? Just because you happened to succeed in sales last month and everyone else happened to fail. This is what they call beginner's luck. Everyone, remember this. After savoring a sip of his beer, the manager said that, "No, I've been in sales for 16 years now, so I'm hardly a beginner." I swallowed that retort along with my drink. The manager glanced around. "By the way, where's Linda? If you're looking for Linda, she's probably still at the office dealing with leftover work, probably cleaning up after Kevin's mess." The employee who answered glanced at a man sitting in a corner, Kevin, who had been assisting the manager with an important client transaction. His significant mistake, involving the use of the wrong product price in the documents, came to light yesterday. The manager glanced at Kevin briefly before taking a big gulp of his beer. "Linda is diligent. Plus, she's a college grad, an elite on the fast track to promotion. A path so far out of reach for a high school dropout like you. You could only dream of it." The manager's derisive laughter made me want to cover my ears, but I endured. Instead, I gave a hollow laugh in return. Even after that, the manager kept harping on me being a high school dropout, seemingly basking in his sense of superiority. Eventually getting fed up, I seized the moment when the manager was busy ordering more drinks from the menu to sneak away from my seat. I excused myself to those around me with a "just going to the restroom." But really, the restroom was about the only place to escape to, so I headed there as I had said, when I heard Rachel's voice from behind, "Sir." Turning around, Rachel looked frustrated, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I can't stand it. Why are you being ridiculed by him?" Tears started rolling down Rachel's cheeks as she spoke. I frantically looked for something to wipe her tears with, but my handkerchief was in my bag left at the venue. Passersby and waitstaff glanced at us suspiciously. Feeling even more flustered, I gently rubbed her shoulder in an attempt to comfort her. Then, Rachel buried her face in me. Feeling a different kind of sweet panic than when we were seen by the customers and staff, I stopped stroking her shoulder. This is problematic. At that moment, "What's going on?" Linda appeared briskly, her heels clicking. Seeing me and Rachel in tears, she narrowed her eyes and pulled Rachel away from me. Taking a handkerchief out of her bag, she gently placed it in Rachel's hand. Then, she glared at me again. "John, what did you do to Rachel?" Linda, too, seemed to misunderstand the situation as if I had made Rachel cry. Well, given the circumstances, it's understandable that it would look that way. Feeling an immense pressure from Linda, who crossed her arms and looked down at us, I was at a loss for words. "It's not like that, Ms. Linda. I just cried not because of him. It's actually the manager who..." Standing between me and Linda, Rachel defended me. "Really?" "Yes." When Rachel nodded, Linda's face remained stern as she simply said, "I see," and let out a small sigh. Then, she gave me a brief glance. "John, I know it's late, but it's okay." Caught in the middle, Rachel looked bewildered at the sudden implications in Linda's words. I nodded towards Linda in response. Then I turned my gaze back to Rachel. "Let's go back, Rachel." I made an effort to sound as gentle as possible, and Rachel, after fiercely wiping her tears with her sleeve, looked anxiously between me and Linda. I gave her a reassuring smile, and she nodded slightly. When I returned to my seat, the manager was completely drunk. His face was flushed red, and he had female employees sitting on either side of him, stretching his grin. Though they were smiling, it was clear their smiles were forced. Noticing me, the manager's eyes gleamed like a hawk spotting its prey. "Hey, dropout. Where have you been? It's my birthday party today, you know. Unlike you, I actually graduated from college, man. A dropout like you could never achieve a position to be celebrated like this, oh." With a dirty laugh, the manager looked to the female employees on either side for agreement. They nodded ambiguously, their smiles strained. Rachel, sitting next to me, seemed like she couldn't take it anymore and was about to speak up. Then, the sound of heels clicking on the floor echoed. Rachel, the manager, the female employees, and everyone else turned their attention not to me, but to Linda standing behind me. "Oh, Linda, you're late. Come on, sit down here." The manager instructed the woman sitting to his right to make space and patted the open seat cushion to invite her over. "No, thank you." Linda's refusal brought a sudden silence over the surroundings. The smile vanished from the manager's face. "What? Tired from overtime? But that's no excuse for not obeying the manager's orders, is it?" Still, Linda didn't move. A vein popped on the manager's forehead. "Hey, what's with that attitude? You think you can act like that towards me? Just because I've been nice to you? Don't get cocky." The manager's voice, filled with irritation, echoed in the room. Yet, Linda refused to sit next to him. I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. I turned to look at her. "Mr. Manager, do you know his real identity?" Standing behind me, Linda looked down at me with a triumphant smile on her beautiful face. "Identity? What are you talking about? Linda, what nonsense is this? He's just a high school dropout, right, John?" Ignoring the manager's furrowed brows, Linda looked at me. I nodded and stepped forward. The manager glared at me with a mix of anger and confusion. Ignoring that, I spoke up. "Manager, haven't you always taken credit for your subordinates' achievements or, conversely, blamed your mistakes on them? That's how you got to your current position, isn't it? What the hell are you talking about all of a sudden? Are you nuts, dropout? Do you have any proof?" "Of course, we do." Linda stepped in front of the manager and lifted her smartphone as if to show it off. She launched the recording app, turned the volume up to the max, and pressed play. "Kevin, you are the culprit of the failed negotiation. Your responsibility." "What? But I didn't. I was just supporting the manager, and the deal itself was." "Is that so? Your wife is expecting a baby, right? What if you lose your job right now, considering all the upcoming expenses?" I'll report it as your responsibility." "All right." "Yes." The room, which had been silent, now echoed with those voices. It was the manager's and Kevin's voices. Looking over at Kevin, I noticed his fists clenched on his knees. He probably recorded it, likely at Linda's advice. No one said anything. The female employees beside the manager quietly moved away from their seats. The manager's face, which had been pale, gradually turned red with rising anger. He slammed his fist on the table. The loud noise made the glasses and plates on the table shake. "Linda, you betrayed me. Betrayed. You were the one trying to frame me, manager." Linda dropped a cold smile towards the manager, who was shouting with spit flying everywhere. The manager, with his face twisted in frustration, seemed unable to say anything back. It was as if the roles had reversed from 10 years ago. Back when I was still working at the headquarters, I had been assigned as a mentor to Linda, who had just joined a company fresh out of college. Dressed in a brand new suit she probably bought for her job start, Linda was stiff with tension, saying, "Please take it easy on me." Unlike the cool beauty she is today, back then, she still had an innocent cuteness about her. "Don't be so nervous. Even though I'm your mentor, I'm the same age as you." At that, Linda's head shot up like a spring. Her face was filled with surprise. Her eyes were wide open. "You're the same age? I couldn't tell at all. You seemed so much more experienced. You have such a presence. Does that mean I look like an old man to you?" No, that's not what I meant." Linda's panicked response made it impossible for me to hold back my laughter. As I tried to contain my laughter, Linda's face turned bright red. "If I seem mature, I'll take it as a compliment. It means my 6 years of working here were worth something." "Wait, 6 years? So, that means you didn't go to high school?" Linda asked hesitantly. I nodded slightly. I borrowed a chair from an unused desk and invited Linda to sit down. Watching Linda sit down wearily, I then shared the reason why I ended up a high school dropout. When I was in my 3rd year of middle school, my father, the family's breadwinner, passed away. At that time, my mother was suffering from a disease that had no established treatment, and my father had been working hard to pay for her treatment. Due to insufficient savings, I had to forego completing high school and start working. The person who reached out to me then was the company's president. The president and my father had been close friends. Having heard about my family's situation from my father, the president offered me a job at his company. For me, eager to work to pay for my mother's treatment, it was a godsend. But I had my hesitations. The company run by the president was a top-ranking corporation. Furthermore, the president wanted me to work in sales. The weight of anxiety pressed heavily on me. Could a high school dropout like me really work in sales at a top-ranking company? I wondered if it would be better to decline, but the president laughed off such worries, saying, "I wouldn't hire anyone who'd be a loss to the company. I've heard about you from your father. When your mother fell ill with a rare disease, you didn't give up. Instead, you asked everyone at school if they knew any doctor who could cure her. Even after finding a doctor, you made sure to thank not just the person who introduced that doctor to you but everyone who helped you look. Your father said you were a son he could be proud of anywhere. I believe someone like you will do a great job in sales." I couldn't help but cry right there, and the president gently patted my head. At that moment, I vowed to work under the president and repay this kindness no matter what. By the time I finished the story, Linda had tears in her eyes. "And your mother? She made a full recovery and is still alive and kicking. Thanks. What I can do is just to show my concern. I feel helpless." Saying so, Linda looked down. She's such a good kid, I thought. It warmed my heart. If you can feel so deeply for others like that, Linda, you'll definitely be great at sales. Let's do our best together. Trying to sound as cheerful as possible, Linda wiped away her tears, looked up, and responded energetically with a yes. A month after Linda joined the company, I invited her to dinner. I always found Linda's profile, as she worked eagerly next to me, to be dignified, and I wanted to get to know her better. But feeling too embarrassed to confess such feelings, I simply told her I wanted to treat her to dinner as a way to praise her hard work. Linda easily agreed. I had booked a table at a French restaurant near the office, popular among women and hard to get reservations. You managed to get a reservation. As we took our seats, Linda looked around with sparkling eyes, clearly delighted. Relieved, I let out a quiet sigh. The conversation flowed better than I expected. Linda vented about her bosses, especially the section chief, whom she couldn't talk about at work, shared stories about her tour poodle at home, and mentioned that grinding coffee beans had become a recent hobby. I enjoyed listening, nodding along and engaging in the conversation. Sorry. I've been talking about myself too much. No, I enjoy listening to your stories, Linda. But still. For some reason, Linda bit her lip with a slightly frustrated look. Then, maybe I'll ask a favor of you. Yes. Anything. Linda's face lit up as she looked at me, making my cheeks relax. Could you drop the formalities and talk to me in a more casual way? But you're my boss, Sir John. But we're the same age, aren't we? If you're worried about what others might think, it's okay if it's just between us when we're alone. I pleaded, bringing my hands together in front of my face. If you're okay with it, sir. Linda nodded, her cheeks tinged with a soft pink. Internally, I did a fist pump. Linda was the type of person who would pursue something to the end if she believed it was wrong. I admired her for that, but not everyone did. One day, an employee who joined the company around the same time as Linda was late for an appointment, severely upsetting the client. The current manager, who was a section chief at the time, scolded the employee. It would have been fine if it had stopped there, but the scolding extended to small mistakes the employee had made in the past, their educational background, and even his personality. The employee turned pale with humiliation. "That's too much, section chief," Linda interjected. The section chief glared at Linda. "What? A rookie is trying to lecture me. Scolding and anger are not the same. What you're doing seems like you're just enjoying feeling superior by putting him down. Linda, stop it." I stepped in to stop her. The section chief glared at me. "Section chief, I'm sorry. I'll make sure to talk to Linda." As I apologized, I heard the section chief snorting through his nose. It because the mentor is a high school dropout. That's why such insolence is passable. It doesn't matter that Sir John is a high school dropout. Linda. I had to raise my voice to prevent Linda from making the situation any more complicated. But her fists were clenched tightly, trembling with frustration. Taking Linda with me, we stepped into the hallway. Not just her fists, but her shoulders were shaking with indignation too. With the care of handling something fragile, I guided Linda to a conference room located away from the office. The moment we entered and closed the door, Linda let out her frustrations. "Why did you stop me? It's definitely him who's wrong." "That's true. But criticizing him would only make you a target of harassment. But just watching his tyranny without doing anything." Linda was furious. Even my attempts to calm her down were futile. Afterward, Linda occasionally voiced her criticisms to the section chief. No one else except me stopped her because they knew that Linda was absolutely correct, and she spoke out on behalf of them. I found myself repeatedly apologizing to the section chief and even buying his favorite snacks to smooth things over. The section chief grumbled, saying she thinks she can get away with anything because she's pretty. Thought he seemed to cheer up after all. That's why I was reassured everything was okay. I could never have imagined what would happen next. Weeks later, there was a report that Linda had encoded erroneous data in the quantity of products ordered by a client. It was an urgent order, and the shortfall was so significant that it angered the client to the point of threatening to end our business dealings. That client accounted for 40% of our sales, so losing their business meant a huge loss. The section chief, who was in charge of that deal, often used "I'm busy" as an excuse to push work onto Linda. He blamed Linda, saying it was her responsibility because the order was placed by her, despite Linda's protests that she hadn't placed the order. However, the order data on Linda's computer became the definitive evidence against her. Linda cried out in distress, "What is this? I don't know about it." Linda was ordered to transfer to a subsidiary company. It was essentially a demotion. I can still clearly remember the cold smile on the section chief's face as he announced the transfer, and Linda's face twisted in frustration. Even 10 years later, I thought I was responsible for this mess. I believed Linda's criticisms against the section chief was valid and didn't persuade her to stop voicing them. I personally convinced the president that Linda's mistake was my responsibility as her immediate boss and requested him that I be transferred to a subsidiary company instead of her. The president only asked me, "Are you sure?" I nodded firmly in response. Consequently, Linda remained in the office, and I was the one who was transferred instead. When Linda heard about the order, she apparently headed to the HR department. As I rushed to HR after receiving an intercom call from them, Linda was angrily complaining and yelling at HR personnel about my transfer order. "Why is it you? It's all the section chief's fault." "Linda, HR has nothing to do with it." Trying to calm her down, she looked terribly hurt. "You know I'm your immediate boss. It's my responsibility to check your work and ensure the output. So it's my fault." As I gently placed my hand on her shoulder, Linda almost collapsed to her knees. I quickly supported her, and together we slowly left HR in a daze. Employees we passed in the hallway turned their eyes away as if they had seen something they shouldn't have, upon noticing Linda's condition. Linda seemed to need more time to regain her calm, so we headed to the break room. It was almost closing time, so no one was there. I had Linda sit on the sofa. Then, Linda began to drop big tears onto her skirt. "It's my fault, isn't it, that John is being transferred? Because I acted all self-righteous and confronted the section chief. Because I couldn't refute the false evidence he presented." Linda sobbed painfully, and I sat next to her, stroking her back. Then, Linda hugged me. The arms she wrapped around my back were clinging on as if her life depended on it. "I should go. It's my responsibility." "It's okay, Linda. I'm just a high school dropout. My future wasn't promised anyway. But you're different. You're a college grad, an elite. You shouldn't stumble here. That doesn't matter at all." Saying so, Linda cried again. I gently hugged her. "Mr. Manager, listen. After John was demoted, I decided to cozy up to you to gather evidence of your wrongdoing, so that John could come back to the headquarters. It's frustrating, but you were good at covering your tracks, and at first, you were wary of me, so it took 10 years. Linda gripped her smartphone tightly. The manager's lips trembled. Then, suddenly lunging forward, he snatched the smartphone from Linda's hand. "This is all the evidence you've prepared, right? No phone, no evidence. Both you two will be demoted. No, it's too lenient. You are fired. Fired. With the managerial authority, I can do whatever I want." The manager shouted triumphantly as if he had just captured a demon's head. The air was so tense you could hear the employees around us holding their breath. "Excuse me, we won't be fired or demoted." "What are you talking about? The political power between you and me is clear, isn't it? Or are you too stupid to understand even that?" I thought even a high school dropout could grasp that much. I know, of course, the manager is in a higher position than a rank-and-file employee. But there are higher-ups, aren't there? Well, yes, the board and the president are above me, but... The manager frowned in confusion. I took a breath and then told the manager, "The president already knows everything." "What? After all this, you come up with such a lie?" As if that would. He couldn't finish his sentence. Stunned, he was looking behind me. Following his gaze, there was the president. I asked him to come. Linda looked at the president and lowered her eyebrows apologetically. The president simply raised his hand to stop her. "President, since when?" Just as John returned to his seat. "I've listened carefully to the voice evidence. It's not true, President. That's not my voice. It's been fabricated. Right, Kevin?" When the manager loudly addressed Kevin, Kevin showed a startled look but shook his head. Losing the support of those he thought were allies, the president gently took Linda's smartphone from the manager's stunned hands. "I had heard that there might be misconduct on your part. That's why John was transferred to the subsidiary. He's the son of my close friend, after all." The president gently placed the smartphone in Linda's hand. Returning the smartphone to Linda, the president faced the sweating manager. "But there was no definitive evidence of your wrongdoing. And until this point, you were a very capable employee, so I didn't want to believe it. That's why John's transfer was meant to be temporary, with plans to bring him back soon. However, he insisted that coming back so soon would mean admitting defeat. If he was to return, he wanted to do so only after achieving remarkable results at the subsidiary. He was serious, so I bet on him. And indeed, he exceeded our expectations, surpassing the performance of our headquarters sales department at that subsidiary." With that, the president looked at me with eyes full of affection. "You've done well." At those words, something warm surged in my chest, stirring my tears. But I thought it wasn't the time to cry, so I swallowed it down. "So, along with bringing John back to the headquarters, I decided to have him investigate whether your alleged series of misconducts." "Linda, I've heard you've got evidence." "Yes. The former employees who were compelled to resign because of the manager are willing to give their statement against him at any time. Additionally, there are evidence of fraud, especially misappropriated entertainment expenses and travel expenses claimed in excess of the actual amounts. A decade's worth." The manager collapsed on the spot. His face had gone from pale to ghostly white. Then, the president turning back to me, he said, "Linda's right. It took us a decade to gather evidence. I'm truly sorry for taking away 10 years of your valuable time." The president asked me for a handshake. Linda hugged me tightly, trying to express my utmost appreciation, but what escaped me was a sob. How many times had I dreamed of this day, this moment? Finally, embarrassed to cry in front of others, yet I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Right after the president took the manager away, the birthday party was called off. It was inevitable, with the celebrant gone, and the mood had completely soured anyway. On the way home, I walked alongside Linda and Rachel. The sound of Linda's heels echoed through the quiet night streets. Somehow, that sound felt comforting. "I'm glad it's all over. I was really scared that Sir John and Ms. Linda would get fired." That was Rachel, speaking with a slight tremble in her voice. "Sorry." As I apologized, Rachel tried to hold back her tears and shook her head with a forced smile. And to think, I completely believed that Ms. Linda was on the manager's side, hating on Sir John. Just a drama to deceive the manager. If I couldn't fool anyone else, he would have caught on right away. At Rachel's words, Linda gave a bitter smile. "I really respect you, John. Even though I kept bringing up the fact that you're a high school dropout, I felt bad about it. It's okay. I always believed in you, Linda." Hearing that, Linda suddenly looked up. Was it my imagination, or were her cheeks a bit red? Somewhat. My face also started feeling hot. "By the way, Sir John, Ms. Linda, are you two really just office mates?" Due to such an unexpected bullseye question, my face got even hotter. Me, dating someone as beautiful as Linda. That's just. Sure. True. Then I don't have to hold back, right? Rachel leaned in closer to me. As I was getting flustered by her body heat, Linda suddenly grabbed my hand. Sorry, we have an after party to attend. Just the two of us, okay? Saying so, Linda, holding onto my hand, started to run. Ah, that's not fair. Despite her shout, Rachel didn't chase after us. Linda's heels clicked loudly against the ground. I was worried she might fall, and sure enough, Linda slipped. Catching her, Linda felt incredibly light. Her slightly labored breathing from running, her body warm through her clothes, her slightly disheveled hair, sweat lightly beating on her forehead, and her eyes looking up at me moistly. All of it stirred my heart. John, I love you, Linda said, leaning into me. With her ear against my chest, she must have noticed how fast my heartbeat was. Since you became my mentor, even after you were transferred, for 10 years, it's always been you. Linda. Linda looked up at me with puppy eyes. Exposing her vulnerable lips, I brought mine closer to hers. Just then, a bicycle bell rang out loudly behind us. Startled, Linda and I quickly moved to the side of the road. The bicycle sped past us. Linda and I looked at each other. And then, without knowing who started it, we laughed. Let's go home for today. At Linda's words, I nodded without hesitation. Gently intertwining Linda's hand with mine, we started on our way back. Some time after that commotion, the manager was dismissed for serious misconduct. The decision was reasonable, considering he had been pushing his mistakes onto his subordinates and taking credit for their work, not to mention embezzling company funds for a decade. His dismissal and the reasons behind it had apparently spread to other companies, making it difficult for him to find re-employment. His family had left him, and now he seems to be completely isolated. Meanwhile, I took over his position. Considering your sales performance and contributions to the company, you deserve this position. Rachel boasted as if it were her own accomplishment. Feeling embarrassed, I scratched my cheek, only for Linda, carrying her laptop, to appear. Seeing her frown, I knew I was in trouble and tried to distance myself from Rachel, but it was too late. Rachel, could you please not slack off and get back to work? Linda chided her with a prickly voice. But Rachel was unfazed. I'm on my break right now. I need to discuss work with John. John, use your authority to send her away. Sir John won't do such a mean thing. If you keep being nasty, he may grow tired of you. Though I wouldn't mind that. The two of them sparked off each other, with me caught in the middle, making me break out in a cold sweat. Looking around for help from other employees, all I got were grins as if to say, lucky you, surrounded by two beauties. I have an appointment, I blurted out, escaping from the heated argument between Linda and Rachel yelling, John, Sir John. In the elevator hall, I let out a sigh, only for Linda to catch up and whisper in my ear, can I come over tonight? Yes, Linda and I had started dating since that night. It's still a secret at the company. I nodded shyly, and she smiled brightly, saying, good, before leaving. I never imagined this day would come. Stepping outside, I looked up at the office building. The cloudless sky was blindingly bright. Becoming a manager was a joy. Honestly, because of being a high school dropout, I had given up on advancing in my career. But education doesn't matter. I realize that there will always be people who see me for who I am and appreciate that, warming my heart. I'm determined to keep growing and striving for better.